Hi everyone. So we are back with the video 2. As promised, we will be uploading one video every week. Just a overview of what we are going to do here. It's a 10 video series. And as I mentioned in the last video, we will be discussing about the 4 type of product cases and we'll be focusing on the structure. How should we solve it, right? Rather than getting to the solutions, how do we get there? The structure of that whole solution. How do we get to the solution, right? We'll be talking about that structure. And yeah, before jumping into the video, I just want to mention this. So people who have already watched the first video, congrats to you guys. You have completed 10% of this series. I'm mentioning this because it's a reminder to myself and you guys as well. Complete this series because usually since this is a self-paced course, I think only 5% students finish. This is the average I'm talking about. So let's try to change that particular number. Let's make it 100%, right? I think this reminder would help you to keep at it. So I'll be uploading the next video next week as well. So take this moment as a promise to yourself, complete this lecture series. I'll be doing this in every video. It's again a reminder to myself as well. I will complete this series of 10 videos. So this is the second video and let's move into the topic. In the last video, I mentioned one thing, right? Never jump into solutioning. And this is something we have heard a lot of times. We know that we should never jump into solutioning. When we hear a problem statement, we should understand the problem first and then go to solutioning, right? And even I knew that 3-4 years back when I started preparing for product management interviews. I was trying to become a product manager. I knew this at that point. I still remember that I was getting stuck. I knew I should never jump into solutioning. I knew I had to ask clarifying questions, but I didn't know how. I have At that time, I have actually talked to few of my friends who were doing MBA and all. And what I experienced was even they didn't know how to tell that, how to share that. They were pretty good at that. They were pretty good at understanding the problem first, but they didn't know what exactly they did, right? They didn't have a general step-by-step process, or they didn't have a framework or something like that. So I'm trying to come up with a framework or a list of components around which we can ask those clarifying questions, so that whenever we get a problem statement, we will ask particular set of questions around a set of components and we'll understand the problem. So the first 5 or 10 minutes of any interview, we should be spending uh, that 10 minutes on understanding the problem, clarifying the problem, right? So how do we do that? What are the components around which we have to ask questions? What are the components of any product problem we should understand, right? So that is what we'll be discussing. One of the major things we'll be discussing in this lecture series. And yeah, as I mentioned, clarifying questions. What kind of questions should we ask? Should we ask about the user segments? Should we ask about their pain points, right? And what I have noticed before, 3-4 years back, I was a beginner, right? So when I started asking questions, what will happen is I will ask one question and then another follow-up question, and I will probably end up focusing more on the user segment, one particular user segment, and then I forget about the whole scope of the question, right? So before even understanding the zoomed out version of the context or zoomed out version of the problem itself, I will directly zoom in to a particular component. Let's say I might zoom into the user segment, or I might zoom into the competition, right? And that actually happened because I didn't have a list of items I should cover first. And here we are going to see a list of items that will actually help us understand the problem in a zoomed out version. It is like a broad overview of the problem itself. Once we clarify all those components, we'll actually understand what is the whole question about. Then we can start zooming into each component, which will help us in solutioning, right? So that's what we're going to do. The reason I started writing about this and talking about this is majorly because when I went into YouTube and I was checking for solving videos. What I felt is many of those videos, they were asking few clarifying questions, but it looked like they already knew the answer beforehand. Why? Because they'll ask 6 clarifying questions and they will get the proper data. They get the proper response from the interviewer, right? This is what I have noticed in few of the videos. But in reality, what actually happens is we might ask 20 questions and out of those, only 5 questions will be answered properly, which we can take ahead to solutioning. So 15 out of 20 questions might be, we won't get a proper response. Sometimes it will be like the response will be, we don't have data around that, right? The thing is, we have to still ask those questions and make sure that this is not a place where we need to focus. That's the idea of asking these clarifying questions. And what I miss from other YouTube videos is basically it looks like they know what kind of question they need to ask, and they always get the right response all the time. It is not in the real case. In real case, we might ask about scope, and they'll say, okay, you don't have to focus on outside India market, let's say. And we might ask about users. They might say, interviewer might say, don't have data around that. Then we'll have to think about something else. But these kind of a scenario usually doesn't happen in the mock interviews or videos around case solving, at least what I have seen. So I'm trying to change that a bit. Here I'm not actually giving you an example of a solved example. I'm actually trying to give you a tool which you can use to solve any kind of product problem. I think that is here. I just wanted to clarify that bit. So yeah, this is what we are going to discuss. How do we ask clarifying questions in a structured way? Right? So that chances of we missing some important part will be low, right? So this is to have that structure where it is somewhat exhaustive. We will ask almost 90% of what we should be asking, right? And just to make sure we don't miss anything. Sometimes we'll have to focus on the user funnel, a particular problem. And if we miss that particular component, what will happen is we might end up focusing on the competition. And that is not what the interviewer might be looking. So so this is the agenda of this particular video also, to have a structured way, like what is that one structure through which we can ask clarifying questions and then end up with the whole context of the problem. So I have gone through lots of product cases, and these are the 7 components around which I have seen people ask questions. These are the 7 components. So when I say this, what I mean is this is almost exhaustive list of components. If you ask 2 or 3 questions around each of the components, I think you will have 90 or 95% of understanding about the context, the problem statement itself. And once you understand that, you might then focus on 1 or 2 components out of these. That is what usually happens. Like we look at the problem from a zoomed out version, then we understand where is the problem happening. Most probably this is where, like, we have to look into funnel or we have to look into the competition. Once we understand this, we can zoom in. Sorry. So that's the whole idea about these 7 components. And this is not a holy grail. I'm not saying this is the only components you can use, but in product problems, not in business problems or marketing problems, like in product problems, what I have seen is if you focus on these 7 components, you will definitely end up with a list of solutions. So this is the starting point, and this is how I also think about problems nowadays. So I just wanted to share this particular thing, and we'll be talking about one component today. Okay. Yeah. Before that, before going into one particular component, I'll just explain what do I mean by these components. Okay. So whenever you get a question, you have to ask about these 7 components. The first one is scope. Scope is basically to understand what you have to include in this problem and what you have to exclude. Let's say market. Which market are we talking about, right? Is it India market or outside India? Which platform are we talking about? Are we talking about a mobile app, or are we talking about only the web app, right? So asking these kind of questions will actually reduce the scope of the problem, which will help you in that particular problem solving, because once you reduce the scope, you know that, okay, you don't have to focus anything outside the scope. You only have to focus inside this particular scope. So that is the whole idea of asking about this component. And the next thing is users. As a product manager, you will definitely have to think of users, and that is another very major component of any product problem. You have to talk about the user segments. How do you segment the users? Should we segment the users as new users or existing users, or should we think of some other criteria, let's say demographics, or let's say the language, right? Or maybe location of users. So these are different criteria in which you can segment the users. So you have to definitely ask that as well. And then you have to ask about the user pain points and maybe the aspirations of users. And that depends from case to case. But you definitely have to ask clarifying questions around this particular component, which is users. And the next one is timeline. Timeline is mostly applicable for root cause analysis and stuff like that. Basically, whenever the interviewer is saying, okay, we started noticing 25% drop in engagement, then we have to ask, since when did we start noticing this? So this component is basically a generic component, I would say. You have to think in terms of time. So if there's an issue happening, you have to ask, when did we see this issue happening? Since when, right? Was it a gradual change? Was it a sudden change, right? You have to ask questions related to the time. And if you can think of this as well, like if we are talking about usage, maybe you can ask something like, is the usage high during night time or daytime? So this is another question which is related to time. So when I say timeline, what I mean is it's a generic component, and you have to ask questions which are related to time, and that will actually help you understand the context, the problem, right? The next one is competition. So competition is basically one external factor that will definitely affect product. So you have to definitely ask. I think this is pretty obvious for this will be pretty obvious for most of you guys. I haven't seen people forgetting about this particular component. I have seen people forgetting about scope and timeline also, but users and competition, I think it's pretty obvious for most of the people. I haven't seen anyone missing these two components. So competition is about basically ask about the competitors and what are their strengths and how are they different from our product. Questions like that, right? We will discuss in detail about what kind of questions you can ask. So the next component is features. So whenever you are getting a problem statement, something like to design a new product, right? Or to design a new feature, or maybe, yeah, again, some kind of root cause analysis cases where they say they notice 25% drop in engagement. So what you can do is you can ask questions related to the features. If there is a existing product, you can ask about the most used feature, least used feature, right? And like if there is some drop or something, what was the usage before observation? Like, let's say since 1 month this is happening, then you can ask, before 1 month, how was the usage of particular features? After, since last 1 month, how is the usage looking like? So questions related to the features you'll have to ask, and that is depending on the type of problem. Strategy problems, I don't think features are a very important component, but some other type of problems where you have to design features, or it's a root cause analysis, then this particular component might become very, very important. The next component, which is sixth one, it is funnel. This is a very important component, especially in root cause analysis problems. You will probably end up looking at the funnel and the user segment in a root cause analysis problem. So funnel is basically a user journey. That's another explanation for funnel. Okay, so when I'm saying user journey, let's say the question is about 25% drop in engagement, right? How do you define the user funnel? So users are coming to the app, they are signing up, and then they are coming to the home page. then they are using the main feature, and then they go back, close the app, then they come back in 2 to 3 days. So let's say these are the 6 steps users are following, right? And the issue is happening in the 4th step. So this is how we'll define a funnel. This is what I mean by a funnel. And beginners usually miss this particular component. That's why this is a very, very important component. This is usually how we will solve a root cause analysis problem. We will definitely think about the funnel and focus on in which step does this problem occur, right? And we'll discuss about this component again in another video. Today it's going to be scope. The 7th component is business goal. When I say goal, it's basically business goal. Whenever you get any problem statement, in some problem statement, they wouldn't have clarified what exactly is the goal. When they say 25% drop in engagement, we have to ask what is business goal. Should we just increase the engagement, or should we increase the conversion? Should we increase the revenue, right? So these are different business goals. So if you clarify this business goal just before jumping into solution, then you will actually end up where the interviewer wants you to be. You will end up solving for the right kind of problem. And that is why goal is very important. What I have seen in beginner level PM interviews, interviewer will be okay even if you don't ask about this goal, this particular component. But they will be really, really impressed if you clarify this business goal and then bring up solutions which solve this particular problem, which is like solving for business, right? So if you ask about this component and then solve the problem accordingly, they will be definitely impressed. That is exactly the role of a product manager in real life as well, right? It's not just the sake of building a product. We have to make business out of it, right? So there will be some kind of business goal associated with any kind of problem, and we will have to solve it in real life. So it's better you do that in the interview as well. They will be impressed, and that's my bet. Okay, so let's start talking about the first component. Before that, let's take a break for 30 seconds. Let's look back and what are we doing in this video. Basically, whenever you get a problem, you shouldn't directly jump into solutioning. You shouldn't even think of features or solutions. You should never say something like, okay, we can build this kind of a feature. You should never say that. That is the major thing you have to remember. You have to always take some 1 minute time and then think of how do you start. And you should then start with these 7 components. You should spend the first 5 or 10 minutes time to clarify about these components. You should ask clarifying questions to the interviewer. And the idea of this 7 components is basically, if you ask clarifying questions around these 7 components, you will have a more or less exhaustive understanding about the problem. That is why this is important. So you shouldn't hurry in an interview. You should just take some time, and then the first 5 or 10 minutes should be for asking about these 7 components. And the first component we will discuss today, it will be scope. Okay. So as you can see, scope is basically a tool for us to focus on a particular area, right? That is the idea of scope. And in this case also, scope means the same thing. We have to identify where we should focus on and where we shouldn't focus on. This is the idea of scope. This is why we are asking this particular question. Should we so let's take this image. Okay, I just made this image up. I just made it up, but this is what actually happens. So initially, when you get the problem statement, you can see the scope of this problem according to you will be very, very huge. You don't know anything about the context. You don't know anything about the market. You don't know where to focus, right? And let's say the solution is actually around this area. If you ask questions around this area, you will actually get to the root of the solution, right? Let's say. So how do you get from this black square to this blue square, right? How do you do that? It's basically spending 5 or 10 minutes time to reduce this whole area itself. And that is the idea of scope. After asking few questions, after 5 minutes, you will know that, okay, this green circle is where I should focus on. And when you ask more questions, you will understand, okay, this orange circle is where you should focus on. So by each 5 or 10 minutes, you'll know that, okay, where should I focus on and where should not I focus on. You'll understand this better and better. So scope after 5 minutes will be this green one, and after another 5 minutes it will be the orange one. Then finally you will arrive at the solution. And this is the structure I'm talking about. This is the structure interviewer is also looking for. Like even if let's say they ask a question regarding 25% drop in engagement, and let's say in just 2 minutes time, you talk about few solutions. You come up with 5 solutions, increase the user engagement. You just took 2 minutes time to come to the solution. I don't think the user interviewer will be happy because they don't know how did you solve it. You have to actually have a process, because in real life what happens is, unless you have a structure, what will happen? You will end up solving few problems and you will get stuck at few other problems. With having some kind of structure will make sure that you will never get stuck. You will keep moving forward just like this. Even if you don't know about the problem initially, by asking clarifying questions, you are getting closer and closer to the solution. And this is exactly what the interviewer is also looking for. I just wanted to mention that. Yeah. So as I mentioned, what not to focus on and what to focus on. This is what scope is about. So these are the few items which will help you understand the scope. The first one is the keywords in the problem statement. When you are getting a problem statement like you are the product manager at LinkedIn and you have noticed that there is a 25% drop in user engagement. When you get this question, don't jump into solutions. First, understand the problem statement itself. What are the keywords? You are the product manager in LinkedIn. Basically, LinkedIn is one keyword. Why? Because that is an important aspect of this problem. LinkedIn is a social media platform for professionals to network and find jobs, right? So probably the user segment will be according to this particular, it will be professional network, right? So LinkedIn is a keyword in this problem statement. Another keyword is drop, 25% drop. Now, how do you define this 25%? What do you mean by engagement? That's another keyword, right? So you have to clarify about these keywords first. Then you will have a better picture of the problem. And this is the first thing we should do. Then you can start asking about which market it is. In which market do we see this problem, this drop of engagement? Is it just India or is it outside India? The answer to this question will actually help you get to the solution. If it's only in India, then you can think of why this is happening, right? There is a reason, okay, something is different about India market, right? Probably it's about user behavior, right? Or maybe it's about some kind of restrictions from government. So you will get to the solution, whatever it is, by slowly reducing the scope one by one. You talk about the market, you ask about the products, right? In this case, it would be features instead of products, right? Which, let's say, ask a question like, okay, what are the most used features and where, in which feature do you see the drop, right? That's a question which will reduce the scope of problem. And the listed items are basically possible items you can talk about. In this case, I don't think distribution channel is very important. Marketing channel is also not very important. Platform might be important, like which platform is it? Is it Android app? Is it iOS app? Or is it web app? Do we see the drop? So platform might be important. Device might be also important. Which device are we seeing this drop? Is there any specific device where drop is happening? And maybe if that's the case, you can then focus on, okay, is there any issues with the UI in that particular device or the size of the screen, right? something like that. And you can ask about category of products is not important here. Category of content is also not very important. I think maybe category of services, right? This might be important. In for LinkedIn, you can ask something like, are we seeing a drop in premium features or usual features, regular features, right? A question like that will reduce the scope. So you get the idea, right? These are the items I have mentioned here. These all the items are not going to be very important for all kind of problems. Some problems, market and products will be very important. Let's say it's about an e-commerce thing, right? Then the products will become very important. Question about products will become important. Distribution might be very important, right? And then category of products will be very important. Right? If the question is about YouTube or a content platform, then category of content will be very important. Right? So asking about these items to reduce the scope it's very helpful when you try to solve a product problem. So that's the whole point. Okay, now let's look at one example, and this is a data and metrics type of problem. We'll talk about this type of problem later, but the idea is I have noticed this there are only four type of product cases that will be asked in a beginner level interview. One is data and metrics type, then another one is product growth, another one is product design, and then product strategy. I haven't seen any kind of cases that is outside of these four types, at least in beginner level interviews. But yeah, you can take that opinion with a pinch of salt, because maybe in 5% interviews they might ask behavioral or some kind of technical questions, right? Generally speaking, these are the four types you just need to focus on, at least as a beginner, right? So if you cover all these four types of questions, you will have then covered 80% of cases in the product interviews. So first focus on these four types, and then maybe you can learn about other types as well. But let's focus on the problem at hand right now. What are we going to do here? We'll look at the problem, then we'll just ask few questions that are related to the scope of the problem, and we'll try to reduce the scope. So we are going to look at the scope, look at how should we ask about scope. We are not going to solve this problem. We are not going to think about any other component, just the scope. Okay. So the question is, user watch time on YouTube Shorts has dropped by 25% in the last 2 weeks, despite no major UI or algorithm changes. So this is the problem, right? Now, what's the first thing we should do? We should look at the keywords. The keywords are, this is one, this is another one, this is another keyword, this is another keyword. Regarding this no major UI and algorithm change, you can take a note of this, just that. But actually, this is more kind of a data, right? They are giving us data that, okay, this is not about UI or algorithm. You can think of anything else. That's what it means, right? The keywords are these four items. Now we need to define these keywords, right? Understand these keywords so that the scope of the question itself will reduce. So the first one is user watch time. How do we define this? Is it the average watch time of monthly active users, or is it about watch time of daily active users, right? Or is it the total watch time? If not the average, is it the total watch time, right? How do we define the watch time? That is the first thing we need to clarify, right? The second one is we need to notice that this is about YouTube Shorts. It's not about YouTube, right? It's not about regular videos. It's about shorts, short format videos, right? So that will help us focus on one part of YouTube. It's not about all the videos. It's only about the shorts. Now, 25% is another one. But this is pretty well defined. The keyword is pretty well defined, right? And last 2 weeks is also another keyword because we can ask whether it was a gradual drop or a sudden drop. Right? If it was a sudden drop, we can think of some reasons, potential reasons, right? So these are few questions we can ask about keywords. That's about keywords. Now, how do we? I hope you understand how to think of keywords, right? Now, what are the questions we can ask about scope? Let's look at that as well. So these are few questions I have noted down. I'm not saying these are all, this is a exhaustive list. You can come up with 10 or 15 questions regarding scope. The more questions, the merrier. It's better actually. So first thing is total watch time or watch time per user, which we actually asked. How do we define the watch time, right? And now the next question is which market? Is it a global phenomenon, right? And which devices have we noticed this particular drop? Which platform? Is it app? Is it a website? Right? In which video category? Is it just about cooking videos or it's about sport videos? Can we categorize the type of videos and then the drop happening only in particular category? If that is the case, then we can focus on that particular category. So that is the idea of asking these questions. Now, another question is it only short form or long video format, right? So probably it is about a short format. And if that is short format, you can still divide it into, let's say, 10-second videos, 20-second videos, right? I don't remember what exactly is the maximum time in a YouTube Shorts. Is it 30 seconds or 1 minute? If it's 1 minute, then you can think about this thing also. Right? Do we see drop in only one of these categories, or the drop is happening across all these three categories? That is another question you can ask, right? So again, you are coming up with categories, identifying different categories and asking clarifying questions about these categories, about video category, about platform, about devices, right? About the length of the video. Why do we ask this? Because we need to reduce the scope of the problem and we need to finally focus on one small aspect of or one small area of this problem so that we can get to the solution. So this is the idea of asking about the scope. And I hope you understand how to ask about the scope. Usually it's around the market, devices, platform, etc. And if it's these questions are actually related to the type of the product itself. If it's a social media platform, it won't be about video, right? Probably it's about something else. What are the category of features, right? Or since it's about video, we are asking about short format, long format video. But if if this product is e-commerce, we'll actually ask about category of products, right? But still these questions are very common: which platform, which devices, which market, right? And then defining the keywords is also, you definitely have to do that. So that's the whole idea about asking about the scope. Now for you guys, I'll just give you a homework, and this is another problem statement, and this is a product design problem. So it's basically to design an MVP for mobile app that encourages peer-based or community-driven learning. What are the questions you will ask at the scope? How do you define the keywords? What are the keywords? This is what you have to think of. Only think of scope. Sorry for that. Think about scope and then keywords, right? And this is the homework for you guys. Yeah. So you can actually comment in this video as well. Questions you will ask regarding keywords and scope. That's it. You don't have to solve this problem. You just ask about one component out of the 7 components. And that component is scope. You ask about the scope, you define the keywords of this particular problem statement, and that's it for today. Because it's not about getting the right solution. It's also about the structure. Do you have a structure of problem solving any kind of problem? If you have that structure, you won't get stuck anywhere, right? You will definitely, in 15-20 minutes time, you will definitely get to the solution. if you have the right structure. So this whole lecture series is about the structure of solving a product case or product case solving, right? So with this, we are ending the video here. We only talked about one out of the 7 components, and we talked about scope, right? And these are the 4 types of cases I was talking about. As a beginner, I would say you only focus on these 4 type of cases: data and metrics, product growth, product design, and product strategy. That's it. And we'll discuss about these types once we talk about all 7 components. So the next video will be about users. And with that, I want to congratulate you guys. You completed 20% of this whole series. There are only 8 more videos to go. And the next video will be about users. That is the second component. That is another component around which you have to ask those clarifying questions. I would like to congratulate me as well because I completed recording this video. I think that's the end of it. Okay, so see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.